Hello, welcome to day 122 of my art development series. If this is your first time here, my name is Andrew Loren, and this is a series that I'm doing where I document my everyday art process and how I think about growing as an artist. So today is actually day 122, even though I noticed day 123 is already uploaded, so I got a little bit confused on the order of the days. But either way, we're somewhere in the low 120s in terms of videos, which to me is still crazy that we've uploaded that many videos in the last 4 or 5 months. So what I wanted to title today's video is something like "It's okay to make mistakes," or something like "2 steps forward, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back." And I wanted to talk about this in relation to the art practice because I think this is something that maybe isn't talked about enough, and something that I want to dedicate some future episodes to, and maybe even a few entire episodes I can kind of go into this in depth. But I wanted to talk about this idea of the practice of art being 2 different things. The first one is your art development is, number one, non-linear, in the sense that it's not true that you're just constantly making progress, that every day you practice you get a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. It is true in some sense that happens. But really, it's kind of more realistic to think that your art development kind of goes like this, in terms of you make some really great progress and then you kind of fall back a little bit. And then you make some more progress and then you fall back a little bit. But every time that you fall back, you don't go as far below as where you started. So when you look at like any 1 week of art practice, it's hard to see if you're actually getting better. And maybe in any given 1 week, you might actually be getting worse. But when you look at it over a 6-month period, or a 1-year period, or a 2-year period, it becomes inevitable that you actually get better or that you progress, assuming you're practicing in an effective way, as I often talk about in this series. So I think this is something that's really not talked about enough, is that art practice is kind of non-linear, and that you end up making the same mistakes over and over again. And so why am I talking about this? So the reason I'm talking about this today is that I actually did a drawing, 2 separate drawings of an exercise that I've been doing a lot recently, which are 20-minute studies of the human figure. And I try and pick figures or pick poses randomly. So I use this website that's in the references down below called characterdesigns.com, and I have like a random generator that just gives me the number, and then I just count, okay, I'm going to do pose number 42 or whatever. And so the way that I've kind of been approaching this is that I'm trying to mimic the process that I often have in actual life drawing, which is this idea that you don't get to pick the model and you don't get to pick the pose, and your poses are always timed. And so the exercise that I'm working on is this idea of like the 20-minute lay-in. So in my opinion, by the end of 20 minutes, you should have a fully blocked in figure that's like a majority of the page. So if I'm using an 18 by 24 inch pad, so it should be about 24 inches tall. I'm not exactly sure what that is in centimeters. It must be somewhere around 70 centimeters. That should be the approximate height of the figure. And it should fill up a good portion of the page. And so in 20 minutes, you should have that down, and also maybe even starting to map out some of the shadows. But I don't really expect to have much shadow massing in terms of like actually adding tone. But on these 2 drawings, I actually feel like this is an example of this nonlinear progress, where I actually think I regressed. So if I look at the last time I did this exercise, and I believe it was last week, it might be like day 120 or day 118 or something like that. You can also see me doing this exercise. And in my opinion, the poses that I had picked were much harder, and the drawings that I did were much better. And so, I was kind of trying to look at these drawings and understand what I did wrong. And I ended up making some mistakes that I was under the assumption that I had entirely overcome in my art practice. So one of them being, really hard or firm outlines. This is something that, I thought I had been able to abandon and kind of move past, but I found myself doing that in this drawing. And so, this is something that I want to be like a little bit more cognizant of, and I even want to spend like a little more time looking at these drawings and understanding like exactly what went wrong, so I know how to fix it a little bit better. But this is like kind of like the number one thing that stood out to me about this drawing session. And the funny thing is I did it on both of them. So I drew for about 40 minutes, 20 minutes and 20 minutes, and I ended up mimicking the same mistake twice, which then goes into the second thing that I want to talk about. The video got cut off there. So this goes into the second thing that I kind of wanted to talk about today, which is this idea of the art process being frustrating. And I think this is something that is not talked about enough on YouTube when it comes to learning art. There's such like a romanticization by pretty much everyone on YouTube that teaches art. Everyone definitely talks about this idea of you have to work hard, you have to put a lot of hours in, you have to spend a lot of time. But I think not enough people are kind of giving this message of the art process is inherently frustrating. Unfortunately, you're partly motivated by the fact that you're never satisfied with where you are. So as an example, just a couple days ago, I finished my self-portrait that I did from the mirror. And in my opinion, this was like one of the better drawings I've done in a long time. And I really felt like I had broken through to some new levels of drawing. And I did a couple other drawings recently. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but some life drawings that I really liked, or I felt like I was really starting to get the hang of figures and really starting to nail it and understand it. Despite that, I make these 3 steps forward, and then inherently, eventually, you kind of start to fall back. And this is just like I'm saying, this nonlinear growth that you just kind of start making some mistakes. And that is so frustrating. It's like miserable. It's like probably one of like the worst feelings that you have in art. What you have to do is just kind of to the best of your ability, you have to process it and then understand that the only way through is forward. You have to just keep going. I heard this said recently, there's nobody who stuck with this for a good 5-10 years, like really stuck with it, trying to practice, making quality practice, trying to improve. There's nobody that has done that hasn't made it through to a point where you're at least at that level where you have solid fundamentals and you're generally doing okay with all of your sketches. You're never going to be perfect, and that's just unfortunately part of the art process, is that you're always going to be dissatisfied. But to get to that point, it takes like a good 5 or 10 years. And in that 5 or 10 year period, you will be met with so much frustration. It is insane. So you really have to love this. Like, you really have to love drawing and really have to love the feeling of practicing. You really have to love the feeling of getting a good drawing and doing a good drawing in order to keep yourself going. Otherwise, you will just burn out, because it's just so miserably frustrating to be getting good and doing great art, and then go to do a pose and, oh yeah, no problem, I'm ready to draw this. And then 20 minutes later, you look at your canvas or your paper and you have no idea what the hell you were doing, or like where that garbage came from. And so, yeah, not a very optimistic note. And I don't know if that's going to motivate you to draw today, but I think that that's okay. Like, that's the reality. Like, enough of this kind of, like romantic, oh, just practice and you get better a little bit every day. No, it's not really like that. Sometimes it's shitty, and you have to like really battle, and you have to be like, okay, I want this, even though I'm so frustrated because I don't feel like I'm getting better. You have to keep pushing and keep drawing, and there's kind of this side to it that has some edge. There's a little bit of like rough edges that you have to kind of get through. So maybe that part's a little bit motivational, and hopefully motivated you to draw today. But otherwise, we will see each other tomorrow for not day 123, it's already uploaded, but day 124.